Hello friends, I'm Shelly Clough, and today I wanted to do some fall florals. I thought it would be fun to make a fall wreath that may be a little bigger like this arrangement here. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through my supplies and then we will dive into painting. For my supplies, I have this, I call this my starter palette. This is what I use in the workshops I teach. And I have this palette and all the colors linked below. I'm going to be using my Canson XL watercolor paper today. This is a favorite of mine. I will probably be using this size 8 Princeton Aqua Elite brush, a pencil. I'm using this to help me make a circle. It's just a paper bowl. And then I may also use one of my Micron pens. So one of these guys might come out as well. We'll just kind of see where the painting takes us. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do when I'm painting a wreath is make a super light, I'm just going to like barely with my pencil trace the outline of this bowl. Sorry if that noise is terrible. So that I have a guide so that I stay pretty round as I build out this arrangement. Hopefully my pencil is light enough that I'm going to be able to paint over it and it really won't be visible by the end. I may just erase a little bit where it's slightly heavier just to make sure that it's not going to show through. Okay, so when I go to make a wreath, first thing I like to do is pick what's going to be my focal point. And on this particular painting, I want it to be some sunflowers. These are going to be my fall florals that I'm choosing. So I am going to mix up a yellow color. Then I'm also, for the center of my sunflowers, I want to mix up a really dark brown. So the center of a sunflower it's got like that dark, you've got really high contrast in a sunflower. So I am going to start with the center of my sunflower. And I do that by doing something called scumbling. So when I scumble, I'm trying to create the texture of the interior of a sunflower. So I'm going to do that by dancing my brush around. And I'm making little marks and big marks and then leaving little bits of white space. And I'm doing this about the size of a dime, or maybe about a centimeter diameter, if you're not in the US. And I just used burnt umber with some Payne's Gray. And I'm tapping a little extra Payne's Gray into that. So I've got a nice dark center of that sunflower. Then I'm going to give my brush a rinse. And I'm going to go into this yellow. This is just cadmium yellow. And I'm going to start making some petals. Now the petals on a sunflower, you want to make sure they have a nice flick at the end. The petals on sunflowers, I'm trying to decide just how big I want to make these petals. So I'm going to do kind of like that. Feels like a good size for this wreath. Not too big, not too small. And you can see when I work the petals around something, I don't go clockwise. I sort of stagger the petals around the flower, around that center first. I find that this just helps me keep my petals more balanced, creates a slightly more organic feel to the petals, because then I end up kind of squishing a few little ones in at the end, which tends to be what flowers look like in real life. So I'm just they're kind of a football shape, they've got points at both ends. I'm leaving little bits of white out as I go, and then just connecting them into the center. And so I'm not letting them touch the center much, because that brown can really overwhelm the yellow pretty easily. But I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'm going to tap a little extra color at the base there. And I am going to grab just a little bit of brown. I want a little bit of that brown to flow onto my yellow, just not a ton. It overwhelms it easily. So that's going to be my first flower. And so with a wreath, I generally like to do 3 of each element. So I'm going to go through and do a couple more sunflowers. I'm going to go in with my brown first. I've got Payne's Gray and burnt umber, making that really dark brown for the center. And I'm going to space my other one out, let's say, kind of over here. And you can see I'm going just inside of that line that I traced, because I want enough room to spray things outside of that circle. But the circle is still just sort of keeping me anchored. Okay, then I'm going to come in back with my cadmium yellow and start. So here, if I touch a little bit of that brown, you can see it kind of pull that color out. And so I like to have a little bit of that. It's just you have to be careful with it when your brown is really wet because it will sometimes overwhelm the yellow because yellow is so light and this brown is so dark. But it's nice when you get a little bit of that bleed coming through. And I love the petals on the sunflower because they're very wispy. And if, sunflower petals are often kind of wonky and lopsided. And so if you paint your sunflower petals a little funny, that's okay, because that's what sunflowers look like. All right, I'm going to do one more sunflower kind of up and over here. And this one I'm going to paint so that it's like a side profile. And so rather than a circle for the center, I'm going to make more of an oval. And I'm going to take that yellow, and instead of doing my petals the same size all the way around, I'm going to make them a little bit shorter on the side facing me. Sorry, a little bit longer on the side facing me, and a little bit shorter on the back side. That helps give a little bit of perspective. Makes it look like that flower is kind of tilted upward. So now that I've got my initial layers done of those sunflowers, I want to go through and add a little more dimension to them. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab some cadmium red, maybe a little bit of this yellow ochre. And I don't want it to be too heavy of a color. And I'm going to add just a little bit extra onto these leaves. You can see I wiped off my brush a little bit because I don't want this to be totally overwhelming. I don't want to change the color of these sunflowers to be orange, but I do want to give a little bit of extra oomph to certain parts of the flower. So you can see I'm concentrating the color mostly towards the base or on one side of the petal, maybe making little flicks. And then I'm going to do that with my other flowers here too. And this one's still a little bit wet, which I'm okay with. Go ahead and drop that extra color on there. And then we might need to come through and do it again, but that's okay. We'll wait for those to dry and then do a little bit more. I just wiped my brush off and I'm picking up a little bit of that. It came off kind of strong. So there is our first element. Now I like to add a second focal flower. So I'm going to add, I want to stick with kind of a fall palette. And so I love this alizarin crimson color. It's kind of a burgundy red, and I think it would be fun to work into this arrangement. So I'm going to get a good puddle of that going. And I'm going to add just a touch of ultramarine blue to that, because I want it to be a little bit more of a purple burgundy. You see that pretty plum color that's happening? Just a little more moody. And for this one, I'm going to do some little roses. And if you're not sure how to paint a rose, I mean, you can watch right here. I'll walk you through it, but I have more in-depth video on painting roses. And so you can check that out as well. But once I've got my color, I'm going to make some roses. So I'm going to cozy this one up pretty close to my sunflower. Just making some little dashes for the center and kind of scooping these little crescent shapes around. And I just want these to be little roses. I don't want them to be super big, because again, I don't want to overwhelm this painting. And then I'm going to come and do one next to this one. Just laying those little layers around. Just picture, you're laying little blankets of petals as you work your way around the rose. And then when I'm done, I like to tap a little extra color into the center, help get that fun gradient. And then I think I'll do one more over here, kind of down offset from my sunflower a bit. A lot of painting a wreath is just trying to get some balance, seeing where things are heavy, and where they're lighter. Okay, I'm going to get my extra pigment, tap it in the middle. All right, so there's round 2 of my focal point florals. And then I want a variety of colors and also a variety of textures. So one of the textures I'm going to add is maybe a different tone of flower. So I'm going to go a little bit more purple. So I'm going to lean into this sort of yellow / purple combo. So I'm going into Purple Lake and getting a pretty good petal of that started. And then I want to mute this color down a little bit too. So I'm just working my brush in there, kind of swirling it in the paint to get lots of pigment picked up, adding some water, and then I'm going to go into Prussian blue here. And have it turn a little more of a bluish purple. I'm also going to add some alizarin crimson to that. So we got a really similar tone to our first flower, or our rose, but just a little bit deeper of that plum color. And then what I'm going to do is some little batches of small flowers. So I'm going to make little petals with my brush. I press down and lift, press and lift. And I'm kind of working towards the center, and I'm just going to tap some color in the center of that. But I've left that tiny little bit white in the middle. And I'm going to make a little cluster of these flowers. So the hardest part is spacing out. I feel like the hardest part is spacing out your 5 petals. So I kind of like to think of head and arms and legs, and you can have them be different lengths and sizes, and it just sort of makes your flowers look angled. Do one over here. 1, 2. Again, we've got head and arms and legs. It's easy to make a 4-petaled flower because it feels very balanced, but then when you make a 4-petaled flower, it just looks a little funny. This one, as I said, it looks funny. Mentally, must have made it. That one I think is going to be okay. It's going to come out in the wash. And then I'm going to do just a little bit more kind of off this one, maybe just 1 or 2 little flowers. Okay, kind of peeking out behind that sunflower. That one's just got 3. Okay, I think it's coming along. Now I'm going to start to add in some greenery. So for fall leaves, I like to have a little bit of a moodier green, which I like to make with cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue. Because, you know, every blue and every yellow, they make a different kind of green, and I don't want one of those crisp, bright greens. I want sort of a mossier green. Feels like a fall color palette. So that's kind of what's happening here. And then I'm going to start working some petals in. I feel like, not petals, some leaves. I feel like this is where it starts to feel alive, is when you add in some greenery. I'm just finding some spots to kind of have little petals jumping out here. So I'm making some leaves a little bigger, some smaller, and then just sort of trying to balance them out around the wreath. And I have some facing out, some facing in. And it takes a while before this sort of fills in and really looks full. But so I've got a few leaves like that. And then one thing I like to do is add leaves that are like a blue tone. Sometimes that feels wrong because we don't often think of leaves being blue. But you know what? We get to make our own rules here. So I've got like indigo and Payne's gray that I'm mixing. And then I think I'll add a little bit of cadmium yellow to that. But so it's mostly this really dark color, adding some more indigo and a little more yellow. I want it to be sort of a different tone of green with some blue in there. Okay. And then I also am going to change the shape of the leaves. So I might make some little leaves like off of these purple flowers. So they are a different tone and they're also a different size. Similar shape on these ones, but the size really helps it look different. Just sort of placing a few of those around. And then I think I need maybe another focal flower. So I'm going to pick kind of an orangey tone here to build in. So I'm going to take that alizarin crimson from earlier, add in some cadmium red, and we're going to see what happens when we put some yellow ochre in there. Sometimes color mixing is just a playful game, at least for me it is. And I'm going to try some lemon yellow. I want it to be orange, but more of a muted orange. I like to add a little brown when I'm going for something like that. See how we're getting kind of a burnt orange color happening? Because I want it to harmonize with both the yellow and with this kind of moodier red and purple. And so I'm trying to find a color that sort of sits between those two that's going to harmonize with the rest of the painting. A little bit more lemon yellow. Okay, I think that's going to work. Now I'm going to come behind these and kind of make little ruffles or like almost zigzag motions. We don't have to have a specific flower. I'm kind of thinking about chrysanthemums as I'm painting this, because they're a nice little fall floral, and chrysanthemums kind of have that puffy texture to them, but I'm not thinking too hard. I'm just creating some movement. These are nice. See, I'm tapping that extra color so it looks like the middle of that flower is kind of tucked behind the rose. I'll do one over here. So I'm just painting around what I've already laid down as if it's behind what's happening here. Okay, keep going. I'm going to do another one over here. Now I've just got it's like filling in the gaps, making sure our wreath looks nice and full. And I'll do one more right here. So I'm just sort of zigzagging my brush around, leaving a little gapping in the middle and then tapping in some extra color right there. And we can come in later and restore, amplify that gradient some more. Okay, now I feel like we need a little bit of a brighter yellow green because we have kind of this moodier green. And I want one to be a little more playful. Kind of sunflowers tend to have more of a yellow green. So I'm going into my sap green here, grabbing some of that. And what I'm going to do is create a different style of leaf again. So I tried to change both the size and a little bit of the texture. So I'm just doing sap green with like little bits of browns in there, maybe a tiny bit of this Payne's gray. And just a little bit of some yellows. Okay. So here's my yellow green, and I'm going to do sunflowers kind of have those big wavy leaves. So I'm going to make a couple big wavier leaves. So see how I do that little wiggle with my brush? It's that's how I'm making that leaf look kind of wavy. And I'm just going to drop some over here, trying to create some balance with that color. Maybe a little one right there. Okay. So now I'm at the point where I'm just filling in gaps. So what I've done is I've come and done an even bluer tone, and I'm going to do some stems of leaves. I feel like that is really going to bring this to life. I'll do a couple of these. Finding places to fill that in. Maybe right here. Look at that. I got a little fun color bleed right there. I like when happy little accidents like that happen. Very Bob Ross. Okay, so now we've got those leaves. I'm just going to darken those up a little bit. And the hardest part at this stage is just sort of deciding what to add next. And I have a couple thoughts. I think I want to add a couple pine cones because that feels very fall, some pine cones. So when I do pine cones, and I feel like this needs some brown in it to really feel fall. Sometimes it's hard for me to mellow out my colors, you know. I think my heart wants to be in spring and summer. I'm trying to stay in fall here. So I'm mixing up burnt umber and Payne's Gray to get this really deep, moody brown. And then I'm just going to do a little pine cone here. So I'm going to have it facing like right here. And I make a mark on top. And then I'm just going to make, they're almost little like teardrop shapes. I'm pulling towards the center. And then I have to do some in the front as well. See how I'm just sort of, the sides are little flares. The middle is sort of can be like a triangle. The sides are almost more of a teardrop shape. Look at that cute little pine cone. I'm going to do and make sure there's just a little bit of connection throughout that so it doesn't look too just disjointed. Okay, I'm really loving this pine cone. Okay, a little bit down there. Feels pretty even to me. Now, where can we fit another little pine cone in? Wonder if we can scooch one, just a little baby one, go over in here. And I'm just going to carefully try to paint around what I've already painted. So it looks like the pine cone is behind these elements over here. Make it come out this way just a little bit more. It's cute. Okay, can we do one more? Let's see, maybe over here. Do my top. And then start filling in those sides. You just want to make sure it gets a little wider as you go downward. Kind of just think side, side, and middle. And then it looks nice and round. Okay, look how cute that is. I feel like I want 2 pine cones here. Does that feel like it needs another one to you? I'm going to add one more pine cone right next to it, kind of a little baby one right here. I would love to hear where you are watching from. I think that's fun to hear where the videos are going, and also what fall looks like where you are. Do you get color changing leaves? Does it even get cold in the fall? Is it snowing already? It is late October where I'm at. I'm in Utah, and we definitely get leaves changing colors here. But I grew up in San Diego, California, and we do not get much of the changing leaves there. So it's been kind of fun to live here for a while and get some of the little bit more seasonality. Okay, now we're missing a little bit of contrast on this. So I want to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to layer on some darker colors to bring some dimension to these flowers. And then two, I want to add some lighter tones. It's kind of dancing around. So I'm going to do the darker tones first. So first, like I've got these roses, and I want to create a nice deep center for those roses. Okay, so I've got that color mixed up. Tried to just do the same color as before, but a little darker. And I'm just layering the same shapes on top. Trying to bring out a little more gradient to that rose. And then right here. Okay, and so you can see already it's starting to give us a little dimension. And now I'm going to take these little kind of fluffy flowers that I made, are sort of chrysanthemums, and I'm going to add a deeper center on those. So again, that was kind of an orangey tone. Trying to remix that, but a little darker. And I'm just going to go make like the same shape, but in the middle, or a little smaller in the middle. So it's sort of just coming off of the center portion. Helps that flower look a little bit more 3D. Okay, then I'm going to add some little centers to these purple flowers, and I'm going to do that with this indigo color, just with some little dots. Aren't those cute? Little dots. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure that my sunflowers have some good dimension. So I'm going to come back to this cadmium yellow that I started with and add just a touch of brown. I think I might go with burnt sienna instead of burnt umber, so I don't make it too different. Maybe burnt umber still. Some more yellow, some more brown, and I'm just going to try to kind of outline those petals a little bit. We do some little dashes inside of them. Over here. Okay. Now I can go through and add some of that lighter color that I was talking about. So I've got some of this color here from earlier, and I'm gonna add a bunch of water to it. So it's a really soft green. And I'm just gonna do kind of some little marks here and there. This is just sort of loose greenery. We're just giving the impression of some greenery. It's a great way to add some movement to your art. See, I'm also just tapping a little bit of it in some of these awkward white gaps to make it feel like there's something behind everything else that's happening here. So we have sort of a continuous flow of greenery happening in the background. Okay, lastly, I want something to really kind of punch and add some little blue berries. Little blueberries like these. I'm just doing little circles and leaving a portion of them empty as a little highlight on it. Okay, so we are at the stage of the painting now where we are just adding some little details, adding layers where we need them. A couple things I want to do is deepen up some of the centers of my sunflowers. Sometimes a second layer on them adds just that little bit of depth that we need. So I'm just doing that burnt umber with some Payne's Gray again. And I'm just going to take the tip of my brush and kind of tap some of that color over a portion of the center, kind of focusing on that outer perimeter so I get a nice contrast there. Do the same thing on this one. This one was already pretty dark, so I don't need to add as much. This one needs quite a bit because it sort of faded as it dried. Make sure the top of that is nice and defined. Okay, now I want to also add some little touches of something to the centers here. I think I'm just going to add a few little dots just to give it some character. Just the same color that I was already using. I'm just dotting a few little bits of color in the center of these kind of burnt orange colored flowers. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I think we are going to call that done for this cute fall wreath. If you're the kind of person that enjoys calligraphy, you could do a little like happy fall or something in the middle there. Pop this on your wall as some sort of fall decor. But I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I would love to hear any thoughts or questions that you have. Feel free to drop those down below. And I can't wait to see you all in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.